Welcome, everyone, back to the Manage to Win podcast. Today, we have Marcus Bigelow, a special guest. Marcus, thanks for joining us for the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Marcus, can you give a little primer on what your background and what you've been doing for the past few years, and just for anybody who doesn't know who you are?
Okay. I primarily work as a leadership executive coach for Convene, which is a peer-to-peer advisory group. So I coach 23 CEOs on a monthly basis, and then we come together in two different meetings, about split in half, and we'll spend a day together helping one another solve problems and issues. I also do some work with a group called Leadership One, which does family business succession planning. So I do a lot of work with Generation 2, Generation 3, and also as a part of that, I do management training. I'm actually leading 4 classes right now for different companies, doing mid and upper level management training. And so it's a busy life.
Yeah, you're a busy guy.
Yeah. And I live with 4 generations at our house, and so we have 9 for dinner every night. So it's a wild time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All in the same house?
All in the same house. Yeah. My wife's folks live with us. They're 90 and 88. My wife and I, and then we have our middle daughter and her husband, and then 3 grandkids. So yeah, it's a happy family most of the time. You know, every once in a while with 9 people, you get on each other's nerves, but not very often. So.
Oh man, have to get outside to get some personal space every now and then, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a big rambling house. We've done it for 8 years now. We've actually lived 3 generations, the younger 3 generations for 12 years, and just added about 8 years ago, added my father-in-law and mother-in-law in, and it's worked out well. That's another podcast, probably.
Yeah.
Intergenerational living. It's kind of an interesting thing. I saw that one of the big home builders, I think it's Lennar, is now has intergenerational living house plans, because it's becoming such an important part of our economy and part of our way of living.
Well, so many people. Yeah. So and so many people in my generation are probably wondering if they can even afford to buy a home. So. Yeah. If there's a place they can stay and kind of parents can help out and set the tone with a big place for everyone, that's great.
Yeah, there isn't some economy of scale.
Yeah, cool. Well, I bet it plays into your consulting leadership work a lot too.
There is some connection. I think you learn to respect one another, and that's important. And that's important in management and leadership. It's important in a family that we're different. My daughter lived in Chile for a number of years, and she said, "Dad, it's not weird. It's just different." And so we all have our uniquenesses. We all have our idiosyncrasies. But if we can respect one another, it makes getting along a lot easier.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you're doing a bunch of leadership trainings. How much training do you find that most leaders have?
Good question. I just saw a statistic. I think it was in Forbes, but it might have been in Wall Street Journal or one of the publications I read, that the average company under 200 employees spends 13 minutes a year on manager training. Which is kind of like saying hi. Now, I'm sure that doesn't include mandated, sexual harassment training and stuff like that. But in terms of improving their skills, it's almost non-existent. I've probably had 130 students in the last year, and I ask every class that we do. I say, so tell me, have you received any manager training? And I would say out of 130, maybe 6 hands have gone up. And Forbes and HBR and all the leaders say that if your managers aren't trained, your company's in trouble. I think it was Forbes just released a study saying that managers are responsible between 70 and 80% of the success of a company. And so you have this huge number of people. First of all, most of them were chosen wrongly. Most people get put in a management job because they are good doers and they're great technicians. But as soon as that's not what a manager does. A manager isn't about doing, it's about helping other people do. And we don't have any training for that. And so you have people who maybe are unqualified, got stuck in a position, or that was the only path for advancement, and the only way to make any more money was to become a manager rather than doing what they're really good at. Trying to be managers without any training, it's a recipe for failure or for frustration. And so I'm really passionate about it. You can tell. And Gallup in 2016 released a study. Every year Gallup comes out with the employee engagement surveys, and this year, after 20 years of working on it, we're up 3 points. So this year, 33% of employees are engaged, 51% are unengaged, and 16% are actively disengaged. But the scary thing was in 2016, they did that same employee engagement survey for managers, and they found that the stats were almost the same, that about the same percentage of managers were engaged as other employees, about the same amount were unengaged, and about the same amount were disengaged, actively disengaged. And along with that, then Gallup's suggestion is that those managers who are actively disengaged are the ones that have actively disengaged employees.
Yeah.
Those that are unengaged have unengaged employees. So if only 33% of our managers are engaged, we're in a world of hurt. We have got to figure out a way to bring some change to this system.
Yeah, wasn't the number in the Gallup survey? I actually thought the number of employees that were actively engaged had dropped.
No, this year it went up for the first time in a long time.
For actively engaged?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Because
went up to 33% this year.
Oh, okay. Because I thought it had dropped. So I had written a blog on that actually recently because I had seen it somewhere and then quoted whatever I had read, but I thought it had dropped. But still, I mean,
yeah, if only a third are actively engaged, that's not really healthy.
Can either of you describe what engaged means? What down to the basic parts of it? What does that mean?
Okay, yeah. So actively engaged means I come to work with some excitement and some energy, and I give my best. If I have to work a little extra time, it doesn't throw me to pieces. I think about it positively when I'm at home, not just negatively when I'm at home. Disengage means I punch in at 8, at 10:01 I punch out, at 10:11 I punch back in, and I'm legalistic about the clock, and I get done what I have to get done. Actively disengaged means I'm actually saying, we should figure out a way to get David fired. We should, this company stinks, and we should go someplace else. And they are almost unsavable. And from my perspective, you kind of warn them once, you warn them twice, and then you let them go bless some other company. Because I think that's the challenge is how do you take somebody who hates you and turn them into a fan? And I guess that would be another way to think about it, would be that actively engaged are fans. They're what Blanchard would call raving fans. They love you. They love what you do. They're excited to be there. And the rest are just kind of ho-hum or I hate you.
Well, when it comes to those actively disengaged or just the low performers, do you find, as I find in my practice, that most leaders struggle to let them go? They postpone it. And I'm not talking postponing a few days or a few weeks. It's very typical they postpone it by months or over a year.
Or decades.
Yeah.
I have a situation. I'm working with a team right now that this fella was close to the CEO of a former generation and did some good stuff 20 years ago. But for the past 10 years, he has been a thorn in their flesh. He has not contributed actively to the company, and he's still there. And he still kind of runs under the cover of this former CEO who happened to be part business owner. But yeah, I think people hang on way too long. Part of it is maybe we're optimists. We think we can change people. I don't know, it's like the gal who marries somebody who's a project and thinks they can change them. That's not going to work. And I don't think it works with actively disengaged employees either. So, and sometimes somebody who's actively disengaged at your business goes someplace else and catches on, and a change of venue can make a change of attitude. So sometimes I don't think we're doing them any favor to not let them go and help them go on to the next place. I don't think we have to be, nasty McSnarf to get rid of them, but I think we do need to be firm when we do and make that decision.
Yeah, I think that's been my experience too, is that we're hurting them when we hold on to them. And it may not be that they go to the next place and catch on fire and everything's wonderful. I mean, but they need to understand there's some boundaries in life, and we have to help them learn in a respectful, empathetic way that we enforce those boundaries. I mean, we did a podcast on our performance improvement process recently, didn't we, Jeff?
Yes.
Yeah.
So here's what, are you familiar with Radical Candor by Kim Scott?
No, I may have heard it, but I don't think I've studied it, read it.
All right, let me diagram it real quickly.
All right, here we go. We need a whiteboard, Jeff.
I like the sound of Radical Candor.
Sounds like it's a 2x4 across the forehead, Marcus.
So, I'll talk from behind it. So on the vertical axis, it's whether I care or I don't care.
Hold it back a little bit.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's a little bit better.
Okay. On the horizontal axis, I care enough to confront. I confront over here, or I don't confront over here. And so Kim Scott talks about these 4 boxes: where I care enough to confront and I confront, or where I care about the people and I confront, is radical candor. Over here, where I care but I don't confront, is what she calls ruinous empathy. And she tells the story of an employee that after several years she had to let go, and he said to her, "Why didn't you tell me ahead of time?" Because she had never confronted him with what was going on. In fact, he said, "Why hasn't anybody ever told me this?" And then when you confront without caring, they call it obnoxious aggressiveness. And then over here, they call it manipulative insincerity, where you don't care and you don't confront. You just let people kind of drift off into oblivion. And the only one that really contributes to growth is when you have some radical candor. And I think Kim Scott says that 70 to 80% of executives live in the ruinous empathy box, where they let people just stew in their own juices and never say, "Hey, there's a better way." So I agree with you, David, that people are way too afraid of confronting, and the fact that we live in a litigious society doesn't help.
Or they confront them. I mean, they nag them or they yell at them, but they don't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And that's it. Then it just goes, and it's a very dysfunctional relationship, and it's a lose-lose. A lot of times I think the leader is focused on, I don't want to do this. It's about, I don't want to do this, and the reasons I don't want to do this.
I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's uncomfortable for me. I don't want to be mean. I don't whatever. And what we lose sight of is we're hurting the individual. Yeah.
And the company, because these people are recruiters. They're not. Patrick Lencioni in the Ideal Team Player talks about no jackasses allowed, and one of his maxims is that jackasses beget jackasses. And so if you have they gather them together, and then you have this whole core of actively disengaged players, or jackasses, as Patrick Lencioni would call them.
Yeah.
And it's contagious, and it can ruin the morale of a company without much effort.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, I had a client recently, and they're like 20 employees, and he hired a new guy, and it didn't work out. And one of the reasons it didn't work out is he sat the new guy next to someone who he needed to fire before the new guy was even hired.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then 4 months later, whatever the time frame is, you know, the new guy has failed. And part of the issue, not the entire issue, the guy probably would have failed anyway. But part of the issue is he said, I never should have sat him next to so-and-so.
Mm.
You know, and then he
And
finally fired her too.
I was going to say, so-and-so shouldn't have had a seat to be sat next to.
That's right. Yeah. Shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But he's just a super nice guy, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes, you know, managers do run scared. HR has given them so many warnings about what you can say and can't say. We tiptoe, you know, around all these piles of manure in our company rather than shoveling them out. My philosophy of HR is this. Now, there's a passage in the book of Proverbs, Jewish wisdom literature, that says, when you have an empty stable, you don't have to shovel manure. But with an ox, you get a lot of work done. And so my philosophy of management, or HR, is when the manure gets more than the work put out by the ox, you get rid of the ox.
There you go.
I don't know if that's going to ever make it in a book or anything, but it's my philosophy of HR. So
sounds like a good poster.
Yeah.
Workplace motivation poster.
Yeah, there you go. Jeff. If you're the graphics guy, you can put it together.
We'll figure it out. Yeah.
What's the one that does the anti-motivation posters, disharmony.com or something like that, you know, has, you know, if your job can be saved by a cute saying, you probably wasn't much of a job anyway, and those kind of things. So
yeah. The right side of that radical candor diagram reminded me of Steve Jobs for some reason. I just wanted to. It's like, I don't know whether he was in the top right box or in the lower right box, but he was in there somewhere.
Yeah, he was definitely in the confront.
Yeah.
And my sense is he kind of probably went back and forth between the two. I mean, I've talked to folks who were hired by him, and some of the horror stories that come out. But at the same time, the guy was a genius. And so, I mean, I have a feeling that all of us kind of float between those boxes from time to time. So, but he definitely was on the confront side.
Yeah, and I think he cared, but he cared more about the objective he was trying to achieve.
Yeah.
More than the people often.
Yeah.
But there probably was a side of him that was a good guy. I remember I rode on a plane one time, started chatting with a gal next to me. She was the wife of his personal gardener, full-time gardener, lived on property. I believe lived on property. Maybe not, but full-time gardener, you know, 40 hours a week. And he grew all the organic fruit and vegetables and that type of stuff for Steve and his family. And she said, yeah, he can be tough at times, but he's also a nice guy.
Yeah.
So.
I think probably that could be said of all of us. which kind of brings me to something I've been thinking about. That, you know, there's four things that are four. There we go. Four. Four things that are necessary for a leader or a manager to succeed. And I think it's knowledge and skills and abilities, but also attitude. And the attitude would encompass things like caring and being involved with people and those kind of things, as well as things like I just did a one-to-one with one of my CEOs who owns an accountancy firm. And she said, the thing that we have really inculcated in our people, the last person that I bought the firm from was a procrastinator. And we have just built the habit and the attitude of when something comes in, get it done. And she said, everybody's happier. And so I think, it's knowledge is important. You can't do what you don't know. And skills are important. And those are things that you develop through practice and training. I think then that what's the other one I'm trying to think of? Just wrote them down. Oh, abilities. You got to have some raw abilities. I mean, if you were to hire me to be an accountant, you would be in deep trouble because I would not have the abilities to do that. I can add numbers, but I could not be an accountant. But I could be a coach. But then you put it with the whole thing of the attitude, and you get the right attitude. You get those four things in harmony, and you've got a recipe for success. But it's a complex kind of thing. And usually we're good on some and not good on others. And sometimes it varies. So it's just being a leader, being a manager is a very challenging role. I guess if it was easy, everybody'd be one.
Well, that's right. And also you bring up that some people's skills are not on the people side, engaging with people versus, doing something. And I'm struck by the attitude piece because that's a very complex piece of that whole 4-piece puzzle.
Yeah. And I think part of it has to do with emotional intelligence. 150 years ago or 100 years ago, Dale Carnegie, said that 85% of success is due to relationship and 15% is due to technical skill. And I think that was a kind of a pluck from air figure. But as the emotional intelligence scientists have been studying, they're verifying that and validating that emotional intelligence is probably responsible for 80% of success and is a much higher predictor of success than IQ or anything else. And that, luckily, that's trainable. You can improve your emotional intelligence. You may not be able to move your IQ level very far. A little bit. I think they're finding out now that it's not quite as fixed as they used to think it was. But you can improve your emotional intelligence. And that's a big part of the attitude piece right there.
So for our audience that has heard the term emotional intelligence, but hasn't, really doesn't know what it means, how would you define emotional intelligence in the model you just laid out?
Emotional intelligence is self-awareness and self-management and other awareness and other management. So
by other awareness and other management.
So if I am self-aware, I know who I am, I know what I'm feeling and that kind of thing. I know what my strengths are, I know what my weaknesses are. If I'm other aware, I know how you are feeling. I can figure out how you are feeling. I can respond to you. Now, other management, that's probably not the right word, but responding in a way that allows you to be who you are without, and for us to get things done together. So it's that, how do I work in a team setting? Patrick Lencioni calls it being people smart, which there's maybe a little bit more to emotional intelligence than just being people smart, but it certainly has that. I can respond, I can read you, I can respond to you, and allow you to respond to me. I open that door so that we can have an interaction together.
So it's almost self-awareness, self-management, and then leveraging that knowledge to sincerely and effectively connect with other people.
Yeah. It's being, part of it's being comfortable in your own skin and knowing what your own skin is, but then it's allowing people to be in their own skin and relate effectively to those people without having to change everybody.
Yeah. Okay. And that's a pretty complicated dynamic. And even within the self-awareness, self-management, the self-management piece is huge for leaders. because the more successful you are, the more stuff gets thrown at you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I just saw a graphic. In fact, I'm teaching emotional intelligence next Wednesday back in Wisconsin. And I've got a graphic that says the higher you go on the food chain in a company, the more important leadership skills become. I mean, emotional intelligence skills become, and the less important technical skills become. And so by the time you get to be the president or the CEO, it's way more about relationship and that kind of thing than it is technical skill. And I've seen it. I have a good friend who was one of the smartest guys in the world in terms of computers. But for him to advance, his company had to hire a coach to help him figure out how to deal with the people side of things. And he's now become incredibly successful. He's probably always listed in the top 50 executives in the United States, kind of a thing. And it happened because he chose to learn the relational side. And I mean, I'm sure he's still able to figure out the technical stuff. And I think it's important. But the thing that makes him successful is his ability to build strategic relationships and encourage others to come along on the journey with him and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think part of that whole piece is a leader's ability to focus on what's truly important. I mean, because there's so many things they can do, particularly when you talk about a talented guy like that. I mean, he can do a lot of things well.
Mm-hmm.
But is that going to give him the highest ROI on his time? Because that's the only thing he's got that's finite.
Yeah.
He's got all these capabilities.
And that's where the self-management part comes in, is knowing enough to know about yourself to say, I have to say no to this so I can say yes to something else. Because every yes is a no to something else. You know, and I just finished a teaching that I did on the tail of our yes, which when you say yes, there's a long tail that's attached to it. And you'll be paying for that yes for several, depending on what yes it is, you'll be paying for it for months, sometimes years. When I said yes to my wife, that meant I said no to all the other women in the world. I've been paying for it for years.
And they've been crying for decades, Marcus.
Yes, that's right. That's right. There weren't a whole lot in line for me to say yes to. But when I say yes to being a convene coach, I have to say no to some other things because there's commitment. Every time it's like taking on a loan. Every time you say yes, you take on a loan of responsibility to other things. You got to pay it off at some point in time. And too many of us say yes to too many things at one time, and then when it all comes due, there's just not enough time in the day. Like you said, time's the finite thing that all of us are limited by.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Marcus, you had another diagram there that you showed us before the podcast. I was wondering if you wanted to share that and explain that.
Sure. I'll be glad to. This is from David Rock, who wrote a book called Your Brain at Work, one of the best books on neuroscience and business. And
can you hold it up just a little bit, Marcus?
What's that?
A little bit higher. Yeah, right. Yeah, that should be good.
Everybody keeps wanting me to put things in front of my face. But when the 5 things that everybody manages with or has to manage with are status, certainty, autonomy, relationship, and fairness. And when we do it in a positive way, and so we come to an employee and we say, I'm going to, by making this, you're going to get a better position, you're going to be respected, I improve their status. They move toward me, and they move toward more productivity, more engagement, all those kind of things. Same thing with certainty. The same thing with autonomy. So none of us like to be micromanaged, but so if I give people autonomy and say, I'm not going to micromanage you, they will move toward me. By the same token, if I have to be micromanaging them, they're going to move away from me. They're going to they're going to fight me on that, because nobody likes to have anybody just, living in their back pocket. If I do something that I come to a team and I say, guys, we're going to restructure, and 7 of you may not have jobs. I can't tell you which 7. Man, I have just put their certainty. I've moved them into the level of uncertainty. They're going to move away from me at that point because I've scared them. Whereas if I come back to them and I say, guys, we're going to make some changes, but all of you are safe, and I think it's going to actually improve our ability to maintain, the status of this company, and you guys will have jobs for as long as you want it. They're going to move toward me. The relationship thing, the relatedness thing is huge. The one that always is a real go button is the fairness thing. That if your employees think that you're playing favorites, that you're rewarding people or punishing people unfairly, that starts when we're 3 years old, and it goes on as long as we're alive. I think that when we violate the fairness, people move away from us. When we help them feel like they're being treated fairly, they move toward us. Notice that the one arrow says run away and the other says walk towards. I think people will run away faster when we violate these, and we need to realize it's a little slower process to get them to move toward us. But I think it's a very helpful tool that David Rock has put together for us. And I think as the more I think about it, the more I work with it, the more I see that it really applies.
What's interesting to me, and I'm using similar language, but it seems like the move away seems to be, and maybe just because some other work I'm doing, but it seems like the move away, all of those things are triggered by fear.
Yep.
Whereas the opposite direction, when they walk towards us, all of those are triggered by feeling safe and valued. And I think as leaders, sometimes people move a little too fast and don't keep those things in mind.
Yeah. They don't think about what the implications are. And a lot of leaders lead out of fear. I mean, I work with these family businesses, and I would say 50% or more probably lead through fear. And that's a shame, because that's never fun. And leaders are not immune, or work on that same set of things of status and certainty and autonomy and relatedness and fairness. And you're right; those are fear-based. Sometimes they create anger. There's a sense of violation of justice. I mean, all those kinds of things that they're the negative emotions that draw us down from effectiveness.
Well, it's interesting. I heard Stephen Furtick talk recently at Elevation Church, and one of the comments he made that he was quoting from someone else, and then I looked online, and it was much more of a common discussion point. But he commented that when he was younger and something went wrong, he would get angry. And he would get angry, and he came to realize that he would get angry out of fear, because the anger made him look strong. And so you think about it from a survival standpoint, the way we're designed, to survive as a species. When we're threatened, if we look strong by being angry, by looking more powerful and that type of thing. So it makes me wonder, in those leaders who are basically leading by making their people afraid, what are they afraid of?
Yeah.
That's then
good question.
That way. I mean, that's
that's
not a light bulb answer, flicking on a light bulb. But
have you seen the hand model of the brain?
No, but my brain's not even that big, so I don't.
All right, so it's really pretty accurate. And if you Google the hand model of the brain, you can find a couple of really good discussions of this. But this is the prefrontal cortex. It's actually pretty accurate. This is the prefrontal cortex. where we pay people to live. This is where we do the rational work. This is where we do productive work, where we think things through. This is the brain stem, and then this is the amygdala, or the lizard brain. And when I get threatened, it's the way God made us, so that if a bear jumped out of the woods at us, we don't go, I wonder if I can take that bear. Let's see, he looks like he weighs 750 pounds. I have a spear that can go at 23 feet a second. By then the bear's eating us. When the bear jumps out, you go here and you say, I got to run fast, at least faster than the next guy. and that's what's going to keep me alive. So we live in a society where bears don't jump out at us very often, once in a while, but people cut us off on the freeway. We go down here. People come in with a different idea and they say, hey, that work was shoddy. And it takes 0.025 seconds, which is quicker than you can blink your eye, for us to go from here to here. And so what happens is we trigger our employees when we come in angry and we come in attacking and we come in creating fear. They go down here, and here they can only do three things: fight, flight, or freeze. And they don't do anything. They can only be reactive. They can't be proactive when they're down here. And so consequently, when we get people here, they're productive for us. But I see all the time bosses come in and start yelling or start, I worked at a company where the F word was thrown about constantly, and slams and threats and all kinds of things, and people lived here. It was a non-productive company. And so it takes 11 seconds for us to get back into our right mind. The psychology.
That's the best case scenario. That's the shortest time it takes you.
Well, actually, with some serious training, you can get it down to 6 seconds.
Oh.
But that's if nobody triggers you again. The problem is that when I get down here, I trigger you, and then you trigger back. So pretty soon we're throwing brick bats back and forth. And if you hit me with a 4-pound rock, I'm going to find a 5-pound rock, and then you're going to find a 10-pound rock, and pretty soon you got World War III. But without training,
now you're back.
Am I back? Okay. Yeah, it said the connection was unstable there for a second.
Start with the without training.
Okay. So without training, it's 11 seconds to get back into your right mind. So I had a principal in a school district that had 2 board members who got on the board just to get him fired. And they were winning. They would come to every board meeting and they would attack him, and he would go down into here. And then he'd make stupid statements or do stupid things, and they were winning. And so the board came to me and said, we need you to coach this guy. So I taught him this little trick. It's called the water bottle trick. And I don't have a water bottle with me, but when you feel yourself losing your mind, you take a water bottle, you take the cap off slowly, you take a sip, you put the cap back on, you savor the water for a couple seconds, you set it back down, and you've given yourself 8 or 9 seconds to start getting back down into here. And within 2 months, he stopped responding to those board members. They got so frustrated, they left the board because they weren't going to win anymore. And the board came to me and said, what'd you do? And it was a very simple thing of helping him not respond out of his lizard brain, but helping him, get back into his prefrontal cortex. So it's a powerful little tool. You can do it with a little notebook. Keep a notebook in your pocket. When you feel yourself losing it, jot something down, draw a picture that you're going to illustrate to somebody. But if you're like most of us, you have this tendency to get hooked on certain things. And that's just one way you can kind of make the thing go a little bit better. So
I love it.
Yeah.
I think it's a great tool.
Yeah, it's been one that I've taught to probably 500 or more people, and all of them, I don't have any complainers about it.
Well, and one of the benefits of the tool is that you're teaching them a tool they can use when they can't leave the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, ideally, I teach people, get off the phone, leave the room, don't say anything, or ask a question so to buy yourself some time. But I like the water bottle thing. I mean, that's.
Well, and if you know you're going to get hooked, like if you're going into an IRS audit, take a water bottle with you because the IRS is going to try to hook you. If you're going into a deposition with an attorney, or you've got a client that always calls you and just knows how to get under your skin, be prepared, be forearmed with that kind of a thing. You know, attorneys are taught to keep people in their lizard brain when they do a deposition because, you know, the old Perry Mason thing, you know, you kind of ask enough questions, get them so bothered, and pretty soon they say, yeah, I did it, and I'd do it again, you know, because they weren't thinking very well. And it makes a great TV show, but in real life, it hurts you. So, yeah. So I think it's a good tool. There's other things you can do. If you don't have a water bottle, you can, you know, the old thing of count to 10 before you speak, you know, and I'd rather be perceived as being a little bit slow than being stupid. And, you know, and so just stopping a little bit and thinking, letting yourself calm back down is huge. You can also train yourself to think, maybe there's another story behind the event. So I've got a friend who says, you know, when somebody cuts you off on the freeway, you know, what's your first response? You jerk, you stupid guy. And his wife always says to him, maybe he's on the way to the hospital. His wife's having a baby. You know? So, you know, the event is something in space and time. Our interpretation of it is what sends us over the edge. And that's where we get hooked, is when it's my interpretation a little bit. So sometimes just rewriting the script a little bit can help us. And that's part of emotional intelligence, is not always just jumping to conclusions.
Thinking about why somebody's doing something.
Yeah.
Asking questions or cutting them some slack, that type of thing. I heard a guy talk about that same thing about getting cut off on the road or whatever. Actually, was banning over at Jesus Culture Sacramento, and he was talking about it. He just said, you know, I just don't do that. I don't rush. I don't cut people off. It was funny. I went on to Highway 37 here. I think it was last week, or maybe it wasn't Highway 37. It was somewhere else. But a guy actually didn't cut me off when two lanes were merging. He could have come up. He could have gone for it. And instead, he took the opposite approach. And I actually rolled my window down and I waved at him and did a thumbs up. I thought, oh,
with
God,
all 5 fingers, huh?
Up wrong, you know. But I was just like, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, it's always about me first. I can get one more car ahead. I can, you know, it's like, why? This is, you know.
Well, and there's a thing called the fundamental error of attribution that all of us do. It's universal, and that is, if you do something that is scary to me or creates fear in me, I'm going to attribute it to your character. If I do something that's maybe scary to you, I'm going to say it was a environmental thing, something external to me. So if you cut me off, you're a jerk. Your moral character is deficient. If I happen to be going down the freeway, I did it the other day, I wasn't thinking, you know, clearly, and got a little distracted, and suddenly the exit was there and I swerved over on it. Well, I don't say I'm a moral jerk. I say, man, that thing snuck up on me. You know, they should have better signage, you know. I should, you know, and so the fundamental error of attribution is I attribute your success to the environment and your failure to your character, and my success to my character and my failure to the environment. And everybody does it. I mean, it's just one of those things we have to kind of learn how to get past. So anyway.
I don't know, Jeff, you want to end on that one? I mean, that might be a thought provoker. Just say, hey, you need to think about that. It's an expansion on the term double standards.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good place to end. I'm still marveling at how lucky you were to have somebody let you in traffic.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Well, thanks for joining us, Marcus. Where can people learn more about what you guys are doing at Convene and engage with you guys if they want to?
Sure. The website for Convene is www.convenenow, CONVENENOW.com. My email is mbigelow, BIGELOW @convenenow.com. And I'd be more than happy to answer some questions if I can.
And you're the Convene chair for the Sacramento area, correct?
Right. There's about 55 of us around the country, about 700 Convene members around the country. So, yeah.
Great. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to join us. And, we'll look forward to catching up with you in the future.
My privilege.
Hey, thanks so much, Marcus. Loved it.
All right. You're welcome. Have a great day.
Okay. You too. Bye-bye.